Hi! Today I wanted to talk to you about some of my favorite Brothers Grimm fairy tales that you probably haven't ever heard of. So I already did a video about original fairy tales and where you can read them, and I thought maybe you would be interested in a few Brothers Grimm fairy tales. That would be a good place to start, of what you could read that are kind of fun and interesting, but not like the typical ones. So Disney hasn't ever made a movie of them, and you may or may not have heard of them before. Let's get started. So the first one I wanted to tell you about is called Hans, My Hedgehog. And this picture is one that I did of the fairy tale, and it's about this boy that's actually a hedgehog, or a hedgehog that's actually a boy. Half hedgehog, half boy. I don't know, a hedgehog boy. And the story kind of goes through like his childhood and how his dad doesn't like him because he's a hedgehog. And then he gets a rooster and he rides around. Like, fairy tales are sort of ridiculous. Like, seriously, as I'm telling this, I'm like, it doesn't even make sense. He gets a rooster, rides around with a bunch of pigs, and goes and lives in the forest and builds himself basically like a kingdom. So he's like a lonely hedgehog boy man in a kingdom of his own in the middle of the forest. And then these kings get lost, and they find him, and not together, one at a time. And the hedgehog is basically like, I'll show you the way home, but you have to promise me the first thing that greets you when you get home. And both kings are like, sure thing, no problem. And anyway, they're thinking that it's going to be like their dog, or I don't know, the gardener, who knows. But it turns out that the king's daughter is the first one to greet them. In both cases, the kings have these beautiful daughters. See, another thing that makes fairy tales ridiculous. Anyway, and so then the hedgehog comes to claim them, and story happens. And I'm not going to tell you the rest. You're going to have to go read it, but I'll put a link below so you can read it. That's Hans, My Hedgehog. Okay, the next stories, I put them together because they're really similar. And one of them is a little more popular than the other, but they I don't know, they're just really similar. I'll just tell you about them. So one of them is the Six Swans by the Brothers Grimm, and the other one is the Seven Ravens by the Brothers Grimm. So both of these stories, there is a girl with a whole slew of brothers. If you can guess by the story, in one of them she has 6 brothers, and in the other story she has 7. It's crazy. And they get turned into birds. So then she has to go save them. And yeah, so the Six Swans is a more popular one. It's probably the one that you've heard of. Sometimes it's called the Wild Swans. In this case, the girl can't talk, and she has to save her brothers by sewing shirts out of like thistles or nettles. And the whole time she's doing it, she can't talk. And so while she's working on her project, this handsome prince comes and falls in love with her because she, I don't know, is so beautiful, I guess, and can't talk. I don't know. Anyway, he marries her and takes her home, and she continues to never say anything, and he has like a jealous mother, so she causes some issues. And again, I'm not going to tell you the end. The other one, the girl can talk. She just has to go on a quest to find her brothers who have been turned into ravens, and she basically just goes on a journey with a chair, which sounds uncomfortable to me. I'd rather sit on the ground than carry a chair around, but you know, to each his own. And she has a little food and some stuff. And anyway, eventually should I tell you what happens? It's a fairy tale, so it has a happy ending. Eventually she finds her brothers and she saves them. But if you want to find out how, you'll have to read it. And again, I'll put it in the link below. So the next one, okay, I started out with like 2 that I love, but now like the next 2 are like even more favorite because they just make me laugh so much. Okay, so this next one is called Clever Elsie, and it's about this girl, and she's really stupid, but it doesn't say that. So this guy comes along, and he's like, I need a new wife, and she has to be really smart. And he meets Clever Elsie, and I don't know if she like, I'm trying to remember. I think she comes over to his house for dinner, and they run out of wine or beer or whatever. And clever Elsie wants to show that she's going to be a good wife, so she says, I'll go down and get it. She goes down into the cellar and she sees an axe stuck in the wall, and she sees it, and so she starts to imagine that if she married this guy Hans, which she really wants to do, and the axe was stuck in the wall, and they have a kid, and then the kid grows up a little, and the kid comes down to get something out of the cellar, and the axe falls down, it could kill the kid, and it's so sad, and she just starts crying and crying. And anyway, she doesn't stop crying, and she doesn't stop the tap of the barrel from filling up, so the cellar is like filling up with like beer or wine or whatever, mead, who knows what they were drinking. And after she's gone for a while, the like Hans's mom comes down to be like, what's the matter? And Elsie tells her the whole story, and the mom's like, oh my goodness, you're so right, that would be horrible if that happened. And they both sit down and crying, and then I think the dad joins them, and then Hans comes down and he's like, what's going on? And they tell him about the axe, and he's like, oh my goodness, this girl is just so smart, I have to marry her. So he does. That's not the end of the story though, because as you know, clever Elsie is not so clever, like seriously stupid. So you're gonna have to read the rest of the story to find out how stupid she is, because it's so funny, like seriously funny. I think it was a joke fairy tale. I don't know. Maybe it was like the like early version, the 1800 version of a joke. I don't know. Okay, go check that one out. Again, the link will be below. So the last one I wanted to tell you about is called The Three Spinners, and it is my favorite fairy tale ever. And it's partly because it's so funny, and I think partly just because it's happy. So it is very similar to Rumpelstiltskin in that this girl gets taken to a castle, put in a room full of flax, and told that she needs to spin it all by morning. And if she does, then she can marry the prince. And this girl hates to spin, so she sits down and is really sad. And these three ladies come along, and one of them has like a huge lip, and another one has a huge foot, and the third one has like this giant thumb that's like all swollen. And they're like, well, you can come. What do they do? The ladies are like, we'll come in and help you spin all of your flax if you invite us to the wedding. And the girl's like, no problem. So here's the thing that I love about this is it's set up as one of those things where the girl makes this promise and then she's not going to keep it, but she does keep it, which is, I guess, a spoiler, because it happens again like 3 nights in a row, just like Rumpelstiltskin, and these ladies come. And so finally, like, the king is like, okay, you're so industrious and fabulous, like, you can come, you can marry my son. And the son is like, woohoo, a hot girl, I guess, because they probably haven't ever talked to each other before. Anyway, and so the girl's like, okay, I'll marry him, but I have to invite my 3 aunts to the wedding. And so she invites the spinners to come, and when they get to the wedding, the prince, sees them, and he's like, what's that big fat lip you have? And the one lady's like, well, it's from licking, which is, I guess, something that you do when you're spinning is you lick stuff, so you get a big fat lip. And then he says to the other one, what's that huge foot you have? And I don't know if he actually says, what's that huge foot you have, like Little Red Riding Hood does, but it's a fairy tale thing, so we'll say that he does say it like that. So he's like, what's that huge foot you have? And the lady's like, oh, it's from pedaling. And he's like, oh. And then the last one, he's like, what's that huge thumb you have? And the lady's like, oh, it's from twisting or whatever. And the prince is like, oh no, my wife is never going to spin again because, well, we just don't want her to end up looking like you. It's basically what he says. So it all turns out happy for everyone. The spinners got to come to the wedding, and the girl doesn't ever have to spin again, which she hates doing, and the prince's wife is hot. So I don't know. It cracks me up. I think it's so funny. Okay, so those are some of my favorite fairy tales. I hope you had fun, and I hope you'll go look them up. And again, I'll put the links below where you can read them all. And if you like this video, give it a happy thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And that's all. Have a lovely, wonderful day. Bye.